Well, let's turn rather later than we hoped to a rather serious subject, subject of your important announcement later today. You say in a letter to property developers, it is neither fair nor decent that innocent people should be landed with bills they cannot afford to fix. And we heard from one of those people on Saturday. Steve Day is one of those facing a massive bill.
We have a £31,000 bill per flat for cladding costs, and about £5,000 per flat non-cladding costs, and extra £3,000 a year service charge, which is huge for South East London, which isn't a particular rich area. And people are facing arrears and high levels of stress.
This is a reference, of course, to the tens of thousands of people who, since the terrible Grenfell fire tragedy, have found that they faced a bill. They were offered loans to try and deal with the cladding that was on their tower blocks, and millions more, by some estimates, can't sell their flats because of a row that's been going on for many years about whether homeowners themselves, builders, developers, or the government should fit the bill. So you, Mr. Gove, have this important announcement today. To boil it down, are you guaranteeing that people like Steve will not be expected to pay the bill?
Yes, they won't be expected to pay the bill. So the first and most important thing to acknowledge is that we're, 4.5 years on from the Grenfell tragedy. It is still the case that work needs to be done in order to make sure that high-rise buildings are safe. It's also the case that more work needs to be done in order to ensure that mid-rise buildings are safe. But also, critically, as you quite rightly point out, we need to be able to allow people to get on with their lives confident that they're in buildings that are safe, confident that they're in flats that they can sell. And that's why we need to ensure that those who are in a position to pay do so. And that is the developers, in many cases the individuals who also own the freehold, the ultimate owners of these buildings. But it's also the case that there are other people who've been involved, some of the companies responsible for producing the cladding that was so dangerous in the first place, who also have a responsibility to shoulder.
You will know that it's one thing to say that they can afford to pay, but there'll be an argument about who the they are.
Yes.
The developer may say, well, it wasn't us, it was the builder. The builder may say, well, why don't you go to the insurance company? People may say, well, the company in question is now gone out of business. Isn't the risk of this approach that it takes many years and a lot of legal cases to get it resolved?
Well, we want to try to cut through that. And ultimately, you are right. If you look at the major developers, the big house builders in this country, not all of them, of course, have the same level of responsibility, but all of them have been making significant profits. And we are in a position where, in some cases, there are developers who also own the freehold to these buildings and who have so far either not done the work required or asked the taxpayer to do the work required. That is unfair. Now, we want to have a conversation, and a constructive one, recognising that there are many people in the development world who have taken a very enlightened approach. And Stuart Baisley of the Home Builders Federation was on your programme earlier. Stuart is a very constructive, pragmatic guy, and he made it clear that he wants a fair and proportionate approach where the taxpayer, of course, has already been on the hook. We now need to make sure that everyone in the development and in the construction product manufacturing sector who has a responsibility steps up to the plate.
But to be clear, you are speaking characteristically softly, but are you really carrying a big stick? There's been talk of the government maybe using tax or regulation to punish the developers. Really? Because they might not believe you.
No, absolutely we will. We've already taken action in some of the more egregious cases. So, one of the companies responsible for the cladding that was used on Grenfell Tower, Kingspan, was about to enter into a commercial relationship with Mercedes. The Grenfell community were quite rightly outraged by that. I intervened. I talked to Toto Wolff at Mercedes. He appreciated, not least because of Lewis Hamilton's own sympathy with the Grenfell United community. And so that contract ended. Similarly, one of the companies that was responsible for the maintenance of Grenfell, Ryden, also has been benefiting from taxpayer funding through the Help to Buy scheme. That funding has ended. So we've already taken action. Just 2 cases, but we've shown that we are prepared to ensure that the power of government is there in order to ensure justice is done.
But what worries some of the people like Steve, other people who live in these flats, they noticed the words the Treasury used in a letter to you. And what the Treasury said is, effectively, by all means get it off the developers, by all means threaten them, but if you can't, it comes off your budget, the housing budget. In other words, it comes off building new houses. And that's not a good thing, is it?
Well, we want to make sure that, exactly as you say, that responsibility, which the top 7 house builders have made, billions of pounds, £16 million of profit recently. We want to make sure that that money is appropriately devoted to helping to support those most in need. But ultimately, of course, we stand behind the work that is required. We're guided by 3 principles. Firstly, leaseholders shouldn't pay. Secondly, the polluter should pay in the broader sense. And thirdly, we want to work with everyone involved in order to get to a constructive solution.
But it could come off the housing budget.
Well, what our backstop is that we want to make sure that if all our efforts at negotiation and conversation and constructive work don't work, then actually what we can do is that we can increase taxation on those who are responsible. We don't want to do that. That is a blunt instrument, but if necessary, we will use that blunt but heavy instrument in order to ensure that we get the support we need for those who are on the front line.
So just to be clear, because, there are lots of Tories, indeed, no doubt you don't like the thought of taxing people more, but you would do it. You
Yes.
would tax developers rather than cut the budget for new houses.
Yes.